The stars looked cold and empty through the cracked viewport of the Aurora's Hope. Captain Jake Morrison watched them with tired eyes, knowing he might not see another sunrise. His merchant ship floated dead in space, power failing, oxygen running low. The jump drive had exploded 3 hours ago, stranding them in the middle of nowhere. 5 people aboard. 5 people who would die out here unless a miracle happened. Jake was 42 years old, a trader who moved cargo between colonies. Nothing fancy, nothing special. Just honest work that paid the bills. His crew consisted of his navigator Lisa, engineer Pete, cargo handler Danny, and cook Maria. Good people. People with families waiting for them back home. Jake kept his face calm, but inside, fear twisted his stomach into knots. The radio crackled with static. They had sent out distress calls for hours, but this sector was empty. The Krellian border wars made everyone nervous. Ships avoided this area. Smart ships, anyway. Jake cursed himself for taking the shortcut. 30 years of flying, and this stupid decision might kill them all. Pete stumbled onto the bridge, his face pale. The young engineer looked like he might cry. He was only 25, married just 6 months ago. Jake knew what Pete would say before he opened his mouth. The life support was failing faster than expected. Maybe 4 hours left, not 8. Maybe less. Lisa sat at her station, still trying to boost the signal. She was the oldest of them, 61. A grandmother who worked to pay for her daughter's medical treatments. Her hands shook as she adjusted the controls. Nothing worked. The distress beacon was too weak. Even if someone heard it, they would arrive too late. Then the sensors beeped. 3 contacts approaching fast. Military signatures. Lisa's eyes went wide. She checked the readings twice, then 3 times. Jake leaned over her shoulder, his heart pounding. Ships were coming. Actually coming. But whose ships? The identification codes came through. Zarathi fleet. Jake had heard of them, everyone had. The insect warriors, 7 feet tall, with 4 arms and mandibles that could crush steel. They fought in the border wars, never backing down, never showing mercy to enemies. Humans called them the Mantis people, though that was not quite right. Their exoskeletons gleamed like polished metal, and their compound eyes saw in spectrums humans could not imagine. Jake felt ice in his veins. The Zarathi were not human allies, not enemies either, but not friends. Would they help? Or would they ignore the dying humans? He had no leverage, no bargaining chips, just hope. A voice came through the radio, clicking and harsh. The translator struggled with the Zarathi language, but the meaning came through. They had detected the distress call. They were changing course to investigate. Jake's hands trembled as he responded, explaining their situation. Stranded, life support failing. Please help. Silence stretched for long seconds. Then the Zarathi commander spoke again. His name was Tharzan, fleet commander of the patrol group. His voice carried weight, authority, and something else. Something Jake could not quite identify. Tharzan said they would assist. They were coming. Pete laughed, a sound halfway between joy and hysteria. Maria started crying. Lisa closed her eyes and whispered a prayer. Danny just stared at the screen, not quite believing. Jake let out a breath he did not know he was holding. Maybe they would live after all. But then new contacts appeared on sensors. 4 ships moving fast. Krellian raiders, pirates who preyed on disabled vessels in the border zones. Jake's brief hope shattered. The raiders would reach them first. The Zarathi were 10 minutes away. The raiders would arrive in 3. Jake opened a channel to Tharzan. His voice was steady, calmer than he felt. He thanked the commander for trying, told him not to risk his ships for 5 humans. The raiders were too close. Tharzan should preserve his forces, continue his mission. It was okay. They had accepted their fate. Tharzan's response made no sense to Jake. The commander said something in Zarathi that the translator could not parse properly. Something about honor and the void. Then Tharzan gave orders to his fleet. Maximum speed. Combat formation. Engage the raiders. The Zarathi ships accelerated, pushing their engines beyond safe limits. Jake watched in disbelief. 3 Zarathi warships against 4 Krellian raiders. The odds were not terrible, but this was not Tharzan's fight. Why would he risk his crews for strangers? For humans he had never met? The battle happened fast. The Zarathi arrived first, placing themselves between the Aurora's Hope and the raiders. Weapons fire lit up the darkness. The Krellians were good fighters, experienced pirates who knew every dirty trick. But the Zarathi fought like they were defending their homeworld. Precise, relentless, coordinated. One Zarathi ship took heavy fire protecting Jake's vessel. Its shields collapsed, hull breaching in 3 places. The commander of that ship, a warrior named Kelthix, kept fighting even as his ship died around him. He rammed his crippled vessel into a raider, destroying both in a massive explosion. Jake's crew watched in horror. People were dying for them. Zarathi warriors giving their lives to save 5 humans they did not know. It made no sense. No logical sense at all. But it was happening. The remaining 2 Zarathi ships destroyed the last raiders. Victory, but costly. 1 Zarathi vessel gone, the other 2 damaged. 43 Zarathi dead, all to save 5 human traders. Tharzan's ship, the Eternal Honor, pulled alongside the Aurora's Hope. The commander himself led the boarding party. Jake met him at the airlock, not knowing what to say. How do you thank someone who just sacrificed so much? Tharzan stood 7 feet tall, his exoskeleton scarred from countless battles. 3 of his forearms carried weapons. The 4th was missing, lost in some old fight. His mandibles clicked as he spoke, the translator rendering his words into English. He asked if the humans were unharmed. His tone was formal, professional. Jake could barely speak. He managed to say yes, they were okay, thanks to Tharzan. The commander nodded. He said his engineers would repair the Aurora's Hope enough to reach the nearest human station. It would take time, but they would survive. Jake asked about the warriors who died. Tharzan's mandibles stilled for a moment. He said they died with honor, protecting those who needed protection. That was the Zarathi way. Jake tried to understand. Why did you come? Why risk everything for us? Tharzan looked at him with those strange compound eyes. No sentient dies alone in the void, he said simply. This is our way. This is what honor demands. The repairs took 2 weeks. The Aurora's Hope stayed docked with the Eternal Honor, while Zarathi engineers worked miracles. Jake and his crew lived aboard the warship, learning about these strange warriors who had saved them. The Zarathi were not what he expected. They valued art, philosophy, and honor above all else. They wrote poetry about the stars. They mourned their dead with ceremonies that lasted days. Jake spent hours talking with Tharzan. The commander taught him about Zarathi culture, about their code of honor. They believed every life had value. Every being deserved dignity. The strong protected the weak not because of laws or rewards, but because it was right. Simple as that. Tharzan explained the concept of honor debt. When someone saved your life, you owed them a debt that could never fully be repaid. But you tried anyway for the rest of your days. Jake protested. He owed Tharzan everything. His life, his crew's lives. Tharzan clicked his mandibles, and what Jake learned was amusement. You owe me nothing, human. But know this. Should you ever need the Zarathi, we will remember this day. On the last day before departure, Jake wanted to give Tharzan something. A gift, a token of gratitude. But what could a poor merchant give to a fleet commander? He had nothing of value. Just personal items, mementos, photographs of Earth. Then he remembered his grandfather's compass. Old brass, scratched and worn. It had been in his family for generations, passed down from father to son. His grandfather carried it across Earth's oceans. His father carried it to the stars. Now Jake carried it, a link to his past. He held it out to Tharzan. The commander looked at the small brass object with curiosity. Jake explained what it was. A navigation tool from old Earth. Primitive by modern standards, but meaningful. It always pointed home, he said. No matter how far you traveled, it showed you the way back. Tharzan took the compass with careful hands. His mandibles trembled. Jake realized the Zarathi was deeply moved. This gift, Tharzan said slowly, honors me beyond words, to give me something from your family, your heritage. I understand what this means to humans. I will treasure it. It will remain with my bloodline forever. The commander made a formal vow. Morrison of Terra, you have honored me. This gift shall stay with my descendants always. And should you or your kind ever stand in darkness, the Zarathi will be your light. We will come when called. This I swear on my clan's name. Jake did not understand the full weight of those words. He just smiled and shook Tharzan's remaining hand. The commander's grip was strong but gentle. They stood together for a moment, 2 beings from different worlds, connected by simple kindness. The Aurora's Hope departed the next morning. Jake looked back at the Eternal Honor through the viewport. Tharzan stood on his bridge watching the human ship leave. Jake raised his hand in farewell. Tharzan mirrored the gesture. 20 years passed. Jake retired from trading, settled on Earth's orbital station. His hair went gray, his joints ached. He married, had children. The Galactic Council chamber was vast, designed to hold representatives from 300 species. Today it felt empty despite the crowd. Commander Silvax stood at the center platform, her exoskeleton gleaming under the lights. She was Tharzan's daughter, and she carried her father's dignity even as she begged for her people's lives. The Devourers had struck without warning, ancient machines older than any living species, rising from whatever dark corner of space had held them. They did not negotiate. They did not communicate. They just consumed. 3 Zarathi colony worlds were gone. Billions dead. The homeworld, Zareth Prime, was surrounded. The Zarathi defense fleet fought bravely, but they were losing. Silvax presented the facts calmly. Her people needed help. Ships, weapons, anything. The Devourers would not stop with the Zarathi. They would spread, consuming world after world. This was everyone's problem, not just the Zarathi. If the Council acted now, together they could stop this threat. If they waited, it would be too late. The Krellian representative spoke first. His voice was cold, formal. The Empire sympathized with the Zarathi situation. However, the Krellians had their own borders to protect. They could not spare ships for distant conflicts. Perhaps in a few months if circumstances changed. But not now. The Krellian Empire would abstain from intervention. Silvax's mandibles trembled. The Zarathi had bled for the Krellians during the border wars, saved Krellian colonies from raiders, protected Krellian trade routes, and now when the Zarathi needed help, the Empire turned away. But she said nothing. She just waited for the next response. The Valorian Collective was next. They spoke through their hive mind representative, voices overlapping in harmony. The Collective acknowledged the Zarathi had always been reliable allies. But diverting forces would leave Valorian space vulnerable. They had civilians to protect, families, children. They could not risk their own people. The Valorians must decline. One by one, the major powers gave their excuses. The Centauri Federation claimed their fleet was spread too thin. The Draxian Union said they lacked the resources. The Pelleran Assembly argued they needed more time to study the Devourer threat. Empty words, polite refusals, careful politics. Nobody wanted to help. Even species the Zarathi had saved turned their backs. The Norim, whose homeworld the Zarathi had defended from invasion just 10 years ago. The Quilar, whom the Zarathi had rescued from famine. The Basteri, whose first contact with hostile aliens had been mediated by Zarathi diplomats. All of them found reasons to stay away. The council leader, a Valorian named Quentin, delivered the final judgment. The Galactic Council recognized the severity of the situation. However, military intervention required unanimous support. Since no consensus existed, the Council declared this a localized crisis. The Zarathi would need to handle it themselves. The session was adjourned. Silvax stood alone on the platform. Representatives filed out, avoiding her eyes. Some looked guilty. Most looked relieved. Not their problem anymore. The Great Galactic Council, protector of civilized space, had decided to let an entire species die. Silvax's voice rang out loud and clear. We who have bled for 1,000 worlds, are we to die alone? Nobody answered. The chamber emptied. Silvax remained, her 3 arms hanging at her sides, the 4th gripping the podium. She had failed. Her people would die, and she had failed to save them. Jake Morrison watched the council proceedings from Earth. He had connections, friends in military intelligence who gave him access to the classified feeds. He saw Silvax standing there, abandoned by everyone. He saw the representatives walk away. His hands clenched into fists. He contacted the Terran Assembly immediately. Earth's government, still young compared to the ancient galactic powers. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago. They were small players, their military modest, their influence limited. But Jake did not care about politics. He cared about honor. The Assembly met in emergency session. Jake testified via holocall, telling them everything. How Tharzan saved him 20 years ago. How the Zarathi fought to protect 5 strangers, sacrificing their own. How that act of kindness meant everything. Now the Zarathi were dying and nobody would help them. What would humanity do? The debate lasted hours. Many Assembly members argued caution. Humanity was not a major power. Their fleet numbered only 47 warships. The Devourers had destroyed 300 Zarathi vessels. What could Earth accomplish? They would just die alongside the Zarathi. And for what? 5 people saved 2 decades ago? Others argued that humanity needed to preserve their forces, The galaxy was dangerous. If they sent their fleet away, Earth would be vulnerable. Pirates, raiders, hostile powers. Someone might take advantage. They had to think about their own survival first. Nobody else would protect humanity if things went wrong. Some worried about galactic politics. If humanity intervened against council wishes, they might face sanctions, trade restrictions, diplomatic isolation. Earth could not afford to make enemies. They were too small, too new. Better to stay quiet, stay safe, stay out of it. Admiral Kate Sullivan sat through all the arguments. She was 63 years old, commander of the Terran Defense Fleet. She had spent 40 years in space, starting as a fighter pilot and working her way up. She knew war. She knew loss. She knew the cost of decisions like this. When the debate finally paused, she stood to speak. Her voice was calm but carried weight that made everyone listen. She said she understood the concerns. The risks were real. The odds were terrible. They might lose everything, but she had heard the story of Jake Morrison and the Aurora's hope. They taught that story at the Academy. It was part of human history now, a lesson about the kind of galaxy they wanted to build. 20 years ago, Sullivan said, the Zarathi could have followed orders, could have stayed on patrol, could have let 5 humans die because it was not their problem. But Commander Tharzan chose differently. He chose honor over convenience. He chose to save strangers because it was the right thing to do. 43 Zarathi warriors died making that choice. Sullivan looked around the chamber, meeting eyes. Now those same Zarathi were dying. The species that saved humans when nobody asked them to. The species that believed every life had value. They were being exterminated and the galaxy was letting it happen. What did that say about galactic civilization? What did it say about humanity if they joined the cowards? She asked a simple question. What kind of people are we? Do we only help when it is convenient? Only fight when the odds are good? Only honor debts when it costs nothing? Or do we stand by our friends even when it is hard? Even when it is dangerous? Even when everyone else walks away? Sullivan's voice grew stronger. The Zarathi taught humanity something important when they saved those 5 people. They taught us that honor is not a transaction, that friendship is not calculated, that some things matter more than survival. Today we choose what humanity means. We choose what we stand for. The vote was close. Some assembly members still feared the consequences, but enough agreed with Sullivan. Enough believed that honor mattered. Enough wanted to be better than the powers who turned away. The motion passed. Humanity would deploy its fleet to aid the Zarathi. All forces, everything they had. No holding back, news spread fast. The galactic community was shocked. Humanity, that small upstart species, was sending their entire military to a hopeless battle. The Council tried to dissuade them. Other powers warned them. But humanity had made their choice. Within 48 hours, the Terran Defense Fleet assembled. 47 warships gathered at the jump point. Destroyers, cruisers, frigates, and the newest vessel, the dreadnought Valiant, the most powerful ship humanity had ever built. Crews reported for duty. Families said goodbye. Priests offered blessings. Everyone knew this might be a one-way trip. Nobody backed out. Jake Morrison requested permission to join the fleet. He was 62 years old, retired, with no military training. Admiral Sullivan should have refused. But she looked at the old merchant captain and saw something that mattered more than youth or training. She saw the man who gave Tharzan a compass. The man who started this whole thing. She granted his request and assigned him to her flagship. On the bridge of her command ship, Sullivan addressed the fleet. Her words were broadcast to every vessel, every crew member. She told them the truth. They were outgunned, outmatched. The galaxy thought they were fools. Maybe they were. But today they would show everyone what humanity meant. They would show the galaxy that some people still believed in honor. She reminded them why they were going. Not for glory, not for conquest, not for politics. They were going because 20 years ago, warriors they never met died protecting 5 humans, because an old commander kept a brass compass as a sacred treasure, because when everyone else abandoned the Zarathi, humanity refused to be part of that shame. Sullivan's final words were simple. We do not abandon our friends, no matter what. That is what makes us human. That is what makes us different. Today we prove it. All ships prepare for jump. The fleet activated their jump drives. Space twisted and folded around them. 47 human warships vanished from Earth space, heading into unknown danger. Behind them, Earth held its breath. Ahead of them, an ancient enemy waited. And somewhere in between, a species of... The Terran fleet emerged from jump space and immediately saw hell. Sereth Prime hung in the void, beautiful and blue like Earth but surrounded by death. Thousands of devourer ships swarmed the planet like insects around a dying animal. Their vessels were black, angular, covered in weapons. They moved in perfect coordination, a single mind controlling countless bodies. The Zarathi defense fleet was barely holding. 12 ships remained from an original force of 300. They fought in a tight formation around the planet, their shields flickering, their hulls breached in dozens of places. Bodies floated in space, debris from destroyed vessels, the wreckage of a civilization fighting for survival. Every few seconds, another explosion lit up the darkness as Zarathi and Devourer ships died together. Admiral Sullivan watched the tactical display, her face pale. The situation was worse than the worst projections. The Devourers outnumbered them 50-1. Their technology was advanced beyond anything humanity had seen. Each Devourer vessel was equal to 3 standard warships. By all logical analysis, the human fleet should retreat immediately. This was suicide, but Sullivan did not give the retreat order. She opened a channel to Tharzan's flagship. The old Zarathi commander appeared on screen and Jake's heart broke. Tharzan was missing an arm, his exoskeleton cracked and damaged. Blood leaked from wounds across his thorax. Behind him, the bridge of the Eternal Honor was on fire, crew members working desperately to keep systems running. This was a ship dying in real time. Sullivan spoke formally. Tharzan of Zareth, this is Admiral Kate Sullivan of the Terran Defense Fleet. We received your message. Humanity has come to repay an old debt. The words sounded inadequate, too small for the moment, but they were true. Tharzan stared at the screen. For a moment he said nothing. Then his mandibles trembled. Admiral Sullivan. Jake Morrison. He still lives? His voice was weak, exhausted, but carried hope. Jake stepped forward on the bridge. I am here, old friend, and I brought some backup. He tried to sound confident, tried to smile, but his voice cracked. Seeing Tharzan like this, seeing the proud warrior reduced to this hurt more than he expected. Tharzan's compound eyes glistened. Jake recognized the sign. The Zarathi was crying. You should not have come, Tharzan said quietly. You will die with us, go back. Save yourselves, please. It was the word please that destroyed Jake. He had never heard Tharzan beg for anything. Sullivan's response was firm. Then we die in good company. Terran Fleet Battle Formation Delta. We are going in. She closed the channel before Tharzan could protest further. Then she turned to her crew. You all volunteered for this. You knew what we faced. Anyone want to back out now? Not a single person moved. The bridge crew looked back at her with determined faces. Young faces, most of them. People who had never seen real war. But they were here, ready to die for principles they believed in. Sullivan felt pride swell in her chest. This was humanity at its best. The Terran fleet accelerated toward the battle. The Devourers detected them immediately and began redirecting forces. Hundreds of enemy ships turned to face the newcomers. The Devourer tactical algorithm calculated the threat level. Minimal. These humans would be eliminated in minutes. Then the algorithm would return to destroying the Zarathi. The first engagement happened fast. 20 Devourer vessels broke formation and charged the human fleet. They came in perfect coordination, their weapons firing in synchronized patterns. Standard galactic tactics would call for defensive positions, coordinated fire, maintaining formation. The humans did none of that. Captain Ryan Hughes commanded the destroyer Resolute. He was 31 years old, the youngest ship commander in the fleet. He saw the Devourers coming and made a decision his tactical computer called insane. He accelerated directly at them, maximum speed, all weapons firing. He turned his ship into a missile. The Devourers tried to adjust. Their algorithm had not encountered this tactic. Ships did not ram other ships. That was wasteful, inefficient, illogical. They attempted to scatter, but Hughes anticipated their movements. He crashed through their formation at point-blank range, his weapons tearing into hulls that were never designed for contact combat. 8 Devourer ships exploded. The Resolute survived, badly damaged but still fighting. Sullivan watched it happen and instantly understood. The Devourers were machines. They followed patterns, algorithms, logical sequences. Human tactics made no sense to them. So humanity would be unpredictable. She broadcast new orders. All ships, aggression protocol. Hit them hard, hit them weird, make them confused. Show them what crazy looks like. The human fleet charged into the swarm. Captains executed maneuvers that violated every rule of space combat. They rammed, spun, dodged in ways that made no tactical sense but worked anyway. The Devourers struggled to adapt. Their ancient programming had no response to opponents who ignored logic. Destruction algorithms calculated 0% probability scenarios that kept happening. The Zarathi watched in amazement. They had fought the Devourers for weeks, losing ground constantly. Now these humans with their smaller fleet were actually causing damage. Tharzan ordered his remaining ships to join the human formation. Together they pushed through the swarm, creating a corridor toward the planet's surface. But the Devourers adapted quickly. That was their nature. They learned, evolved, updated their algorithms. After 2 hours of combat, they began anticipating human movements. The casualty rate climbed. Human ships started dying. The cruiser Phoenix took a direct hit and exploded, all hands lost. The frigate Courage tried to ram a Devourer dreadnought and was vaporized before making contact. Jake stood on the bridge, watching friends die. He had recommended some of these captains personally, young officers with bright futures. Now they were gone, erased in bursts of fire and radiation. He wondered if this was worth it, if 47 ships could really make a difference. Then he looked at Tharzan's face on the display, saw the hope there, and knew the answer. Yes, this was worth it. The battle raged for 18 hours straight. No breaks, no pauses, just constant fighting. Crews worked until they collapsed from exhaustion. Engineers performed miracles keeping damaged systems running. Medical bays overflowed with wounded. The human fleet lost 22 ships, nearly half their force. The Zarathi lost 4 more. Only 8 remained. But they had accomplished something incredible. The evacuation corridors were open. Transports were fleeing the planet, carrying millions of Zarathi civilians to safety. It was not enough. At this rate, they could save maybe 30% of the population. But it was better than zero, better than extinction. Sullivan studied the tactical situation with tired eyes. She had not slept in 2 days. Her command staff looked worse. They were holding barely. But the Devourers were tightening their formation, adapting to human tactics, learning. In another 6 hours, maybe 8, the remaining fleet would be overwhelmed. They could hold that long. Evacuate another few million civilians, then die. That was the best-case scenario. Jake Morrison approached her quietly. He had been thinking about something, a rumor he heard years ago. A classified project that terrified the politicians. He asked Sullivan about it carefully, not sure if she would even know. Do we have the Ragnarok Protocol? Sullivan's face went pale. How do you know that name? Jake explained. He had friends in defense contracting, people who talked too much when drunk. They mentioned a weapon, something too dangerous to use, something locked away in case of absolute emergency. Sullivan stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. The weapon existed. It was aboard the Valiant, humanity's dreadnought. A singularity generator, capable of creating a controlled black hole. The scientists said it could destroy everything within a massive radius. Could destabilize star systems if used wrong. That was why it was classified, locked behind authorization codes that required the president's approval. That was why nobody knew about it. Jake looked at the tactical display. The Devourers were concentrated around them, thousands of ships in close formation. One shot with the Ragnarok Protocol could end this, could destroy the entire enemy fleet. But there was a problem, a terrible problem. If they activated it here, they would destroy everything. The Devourer fleet, yes, but also Zareth Prime, the planet and all its billions of inhabitants, the human fleet, the Zarathi defenders. Everything within a light hour would be consumed by the singularity. Victory through genocide, salvation through extinction. The weapon was useless unless. Commander Lisa Park stepped forward. She was the tactical officer on the Valiant, humanity's best strategic mind. She had been listening to the conversation. What if we do not activate it here? What if we lure them away? Her voice was quiet but steady. Everyone turned to look at her. Park explained her idea. The Valiant would break formation and run. They would broadcast false intelligence, claim to carry Zarathi defense codes, command protocols, anything to make themselves a high-value target. The Devourers would pursue. Their programming prioritized eliminating valuable assets. They would send overwhelming force after the Valiant. Once the bulk of the Devourer fleet was far enough from Zareth Prime, the Valiant would activate the Ragnarok Protocol. The singularity would consume the Devourers and the Valiant together. The remaining human, Commander Lisa Park walked through the corridors of the Valiant with steady steps. Crew members watched her pass, seeing their commander one last time. They knew. Everyone knew what was happening. Nobody spoke. Some saluted. Others just nodded. Park acknowledged each gesture. These people had volunteered to stay aboard. 200 souls who chose death over abandoning their mission. Park reached the bridge and took her command chair. Her crew was already at their stations. Young faces, old faces, humans from every corner of Earth. The navigator was a kid from Brazil, barely 23. The weapons officer was a grandmother from Japan. The engineer was a man from Nigeria who could fix anything. They were her family now, and they would die together. She opened the ship-wide channel. This is Commander Park. You all know the plan. We are going to lead the Devourers away from Zareth Prime. We are going to save billions of lives. We are going to show the galaxy what humanity stands for. It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve with you. Her voice stayed calm, professional. Leaders did not cry on duty. The Valiant broke formation. The massive dreadnought accelerated away from the planet, transmitting its false intelligence. Park had worked with the communications team to create something believable. Command codes, defense protocols, strategic data, things the Devourers would prioritize. The bait was set. Now they just needed the fish to bite. The Devourers responded exactly as predicted. Their tactical algorithm identified the Valiant as a critical target. The command network redirected forces. 80% of the swarm turned toward the fleeing dreadnought. Thousands of black ships pursuing one human vessel. Back at Zareth Prime, the pressure eased immediately. The remaining human and Zarathi ships pushed forward, expanding the evacuation corridors. Admiral Sullivan watched the Valiant pull away on her tactical display. The plan was working. Already they were evacuating civilians 3 times faster than before. Millions more would survive. But the cost. She forced herself not to think about it. Not yet, there would be time for grief later. Right now she had a job to do. She opened channels to the transport ships, coordinating pickup schedules, optimizing routes, saving every life she could. On Zareth Prime, Tharzan stood in the command center of his damaged ship. His crew had patched the hull breaches, stabilized life support, brought weapons back online. They were still in the fight. Through his view screen, he watched the human dreadnought flee with the Devourer swarm in pursuit. He understood what was happening. The humans were sacrificing themselves. Again. Just like 20 years ago, they chose to die for the Zarathi. Tharzan looked down at the brass compass hanging from his thorax. The gift Jake Morrison had given him so long ago. A simple trinket that symbolized everything. Home, family, the bonds that connected strangers across the void. He closed his 3 remaining hands around it gently. The humans were teaching the galaxy a lesson. He prayed the galaxy would learn. The chase continued for 4 hours. The Valiant pushed its engines beyond safe limits, coaxing every bit of speed possible. Chief Engineer Carlos Rodriguez worked miracles in the engine room, rerouting power, bypassing safety systems, keeping the ship ahead of the swarm. They jettisoned everything they could spare. Cargo, shuttles, even furniture. Anything to reduce mass and gain a few more seconds. But the Devourers were faster. Slowly, inevitably, they gained ground. Their lead ships were only minutes behind now. Park watched them close in on her display. Almost there. Just a little farther. They needed to reach the designated coordinates. Far enough from Zareth Prime to ensure the planet's safety. Deep enough to catch the entire pursuing fleet. Almost there. The navigator called out their position. Coordinates reached, Commander. We are in position. Park nodded. She opened a final channel to Admiral Sullivan. Admiral, we are ready. What is the status of the evacuation? Sullivan's face appeared on screen. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. 72% complete, Commander. Another hour and we can get everyone out. Park looked at her display. The Devourers were seconds away from weapons range. An hour was too long. They would be caught, destroyed before they could activate the weapon. She made the decision commanders make. The hard one. The necessary one. Negative, Admiral. Devourers are too close. If we wait, they will overtake us before activation. We are proceeding now. Sullivan's control broke for just a moment. Commander Park, Lisa, there has to be another way. Give me 5 minutes. We can figure something out. Park smiled sadly. There is no other way, Admiral. This is what we came to do. Tell Earth. Tell them we were not afraid. Actually, that is a lie. We are terrified. But we are doing it anyway. Park closed the channel before Sullivan could respond. She turned to face her bridge crew. Every person there watched her with absolute trust. They had followed her into hell. Now they would follow her into oblivion. She felt tears on her cheeks and did not bother wiping them away. It has been an honor serving with you all. For Earth, for the Zarathi, for honor. The crew responded as one voice. For honor. 200 people speaking together, accepting their fate. Park entered her authorization codes into the command console. The singularity generator activated deep in the Valiant's core. Warning alarms screamed throughout the ship. Reality itself began to twist. Space warped around the Valiant. A point of absolute darkness appeared, smaller than an atom but containing the mass of a star. The generator's containment field held it, shaped it, directed it. The black hole grew, fed by the exotic matter the generator produced. Physics bent, time distorted. Light curved inward toward the impossible darkness. The leading devourer ships had no time to react. They were caught in the gravitational field before their algorithms registered the threat. Hulls stretched and compressed. Metal screamed as ships were torn apart by tidal forces. The ancient machines tried to retreat, firing engines at maximum power. It made no difference. The singularity pulled them inward like leaves in a hurricane. Hundreds of devourer vessels spiraled into the darkness. Their weapons fired uselessly. Their armor meant nothing. Thousands of years of technological advancement erased by fundamental physics. The swarm that had terrified the galaxy, that had destroyed Zarathi worlds, was being consumed by a force older than stars. The Valiant shook violently. Structural supports groaned. Bulkheads buckled. Park maintained the generator's field, using every bit of skill she possessed. The singularity had to stay stable, had to stay directional. If the field collapsed, the black hole would expand uncontrolled, consuming everything for light years. She could not let that happen. Billions depended on her holding this together. The ship began to come apart. Outer hull sections tore away, spinning into the singularity. Atmosphere vented into space. Power systems failed one by one. Park's console sparked and died. She switched to manual controls, her hands flying across backup systems. Just a little longer. Just hold it a little longer. Around her, the bridge crew stayed at their stations even as the ship died. The navigator calculated trajectories until his console exploded. The weapons officer maintained what remained of their defensive systems. The engineer rerouted power to the generator until there was no power left to route. They did their jobs to the very end. That was what humans did. Park felt the ship begin its final plunge. The generator was failing. The containment field was collapsing. In seconds, they would be pulled into the singularity they had created. She had one last chance to send a message. Her fingers found the emergency transmitter. It still had power, barely enough. She keyed the microphone. Sullivan, complete the evacuation. Tell Morrison. Compass. Pointing. Home. Her voice was barely audible through the interference. Then the transmitter died. The Valiant broke apart, pieces of the great ship spinning into darkness. Commander Lisa Park and her crew of 200 vanished into the singularity. No bodies to recover, no graves to visit, just empty space where heroes had stood. The singularity collapsed a moment later, the generator's exotic matter exhausted. Space snapped back to normal, leaving a distortion that would persist for decades. Astronomers would study it for generations, calling it the Valiant anomaly. They would write papers about the physics involved, but they would never fully understand what happened there. How 200 humans chose to become physics. Back at Zareth Prime, every sensor registered the massive gravitational event simultaneously. The readings were clear. The Valiant was gone. The Devourer pursuit fleet was gone. 94% of the enemy forces, thousands of ships simply erased from existence. The remaining Devourers, those few that had stayed near the planet, hesitated. For the first time in the entire war, they hesitated. Admiral Sullivan stared at her display. The tactical map showed the impossible result. The Devourers were broken. Their numerical advantage was gone. For the first time since this started, the defending forces actually outnumbered the enemy. She felt no joy. Only pain, only loss. But she was a commander. She had a duty. She opened fleet communications, All ships advance. Destroy them all. Avenge the valiant. Her voice was ice. The remaining human and Zarathi vessels surged forward. They fell on the surviving devourers with fury that was terrible to witness. No mercy, no hesitation, just pure focused rage. The enemy ships tried to... The news reached the Galactic Council within 6 hours. Initial reports were dismissed as propaganda. Surely no species would sacrifice so much for another. Surely the humans were exaggerating their losses for political gain. But then the sensor logs arrived from multiple independent sources. Verification from dozens of observation stations. The impossible was confirmed. Humanity had deployed a weapon that reshaped space itself and willingly sacrificed their most powerful warship to save the Zarathi. The Krellian Empire was the first to truly understand what happened. Their military intelligence analyzed the data carefully. The human weapon, this Ragnarok protocol, was powerful enough to destroy their homeworld, could threaten any civilization in the galaxy, and humanity had never mentioned it, never used it as leverage in negotiations, never threatened anyone with it. They just kept it hidden until friends needed saving. The Valorian Collective calculated the strategic implications. If humans possessed weapons like this, what else did they have? What other capabilities had they hidden? More importantly, why had they hidden them? The answer was disturbing. Humanity had not hidden their weapons to surprise enemies. They had hidden them because they never intended to use them except in the most extreme circumstances. This was a species that valued restraint over intimidation. The Centauri Federation reviewed their decision to refuse aid to the Zarathi. They had calculated that intervention was not worth the risk. But they had miscalculated something fundamental. They had assumed the Zarathi situation was just another border conflict. They had not realized this was a test. The galaxy had been tested, and humanity was the only species that passed. Emergency council sessions were called. Every major power sent their highest leaders personally. This was unprecedented. The council chamber had not been this full in centuries. Everyone wanted to understand what humanity had done and why. More importantly, they wanted to understand what it meant for them. Admiral Kate Sullivan arrived to represent humanity. She was exhausted, grieving, angry, but she was a professional. She wore her dress uniform, medals gleaming, and walked into that chamber with her head high. Jake Morrison walked beside her, looking old and tired. They entered a room that had abandoned the Zarathi. Now that room wanted answers. Council leader Quentin opened the session formally. We gathered to discuss the recent events at Zareth Prime. The human intervention has raised many questions. We seek clarification on several matters. His tone was diplomatic, but everyone heard the underlying concern. Fear. The galaxy's leaders were afraid of humanity now. The Krellian Emperor spoke first. Why was this weapon concealed from the Council? Treaties require disclosure of strategic capabilities. Humanity violated protocols by maintaining secret weapons programs. This is a serious matter. His words were harsh, but his eyes showed something else. Respect mixed with fear, a dangerous combination. Sullivan responded calmly. We concealed nothing. Nobody asked about our defense research. We signed no treaties requiring disclosure. We are a sovereign species. We develop what we need to survive. If you failed to ask the right questions, that is your failure, not ours. The directness shocked the chamber. Humans did not usually speak so bluntly to major powers. A Valorian representative asked the next question. Why use such a devastating weapon for the Zarathi? You could have used it to gain concessions from other powers, to establish dominance, to expand your territory. Instead, you sacrificed your strongest ship and 200 personnel. The strategic logic is unclear. Explain your reasoning. Sullivan's eyes went cold. We used it because friends needed help. That you find this confusing says more about you than us. We do not calculate the value of friendship in strategic terms. We do not measure honor in political capital. Some of us still believe that doing the right thing matters more than gaining advantage. Perhaps you have forgotten what that means. Silence fell across the chamber. No one had ever spoken to the council like this. Sullivan continued, her voice gaining strength. You want to know why we did this? 20 years ago, Commander Tharzan saved 5 humans. He did not have to. He got nothing from it except the knowledge he did the right thing. That taught us something. That showed us what honor looks like. When his people needed help, when all of you turned away, we remembered that lesson. We repaid the debt. She looked around at the assembled representatives. You are asking the wrong questions. You want to know about our weapons, our capabilities, our strategic thinking. But you should be asking yourselves why you failed, why you let an entire species face extinction alone, why none of you believed the Zarathi were worth saving. That is the question that matters. Tharzan arrived at that moment. The old warrior had requested permission to address the council. He limped into the chamber, his damaged body held together by medical supports, but his presence commanded immediate attention. He was a living legend, hero of 100 battles, savior of countless worlds, and he had something to say. This council failed my people. His voice echoed in the vast space. You who we defended, you who we bled for. When darkness came for us, you turned away. Every excuse was reasonable. Every calculation was logical. But you forgot something. You forgot that civilizations are built on more than logic. They are built on bonds, on trust, on the belief that we stand together against the void. Tharzan pulled out Jake's brass compass from inside his armor. 20 years ago, I saved 5 humans because it was right. Not for alliance, not for politics, because no one should die alone in space. This human gave me this gift when he owed me nothing. A simple compass from his grandfather. I have carried it every day since. It reminds me what matters. He held the compass high. Humanity remembered that gift. When we faced extinction, when all of you abandoned us, they came. 200 humans gave their lives. Hundreds more were wounded. They deployed their most terrible weapon not for conquest, but for salvation. They did this because they understand something you have forgotten. That honor is not transactional. That friendship is not measured by strategic value. That some things are worth dying for. You ask why humans did this? The answer is simple. They did it because they could not live with themselves if they did not. Because when they looked in the mirror, they wanted to see people of honor. Because they believed their humanity meant something. Can any of you say the same? When you look in the mirror, what do you see? The chamber stayed silent. Many representatives looked away. Some stared at the floor. Others met Tharzan's gaze but could not hold it. The shame was palpable. The guilt was real. They had failed. Not strategically, not politically, morally. They had let fear and calculation override compassion, and a young species had shown them the cost of that failure. The Krellian Emperor stood. This was shocking. Emperors did not stand for anyone. But he rose from his seat and looked directly at Sullivan. Admiral Sullivan, on behalf of the Krellian Empire, I offer our deepest apologies. We were wrong. About everything. About the Zarathi. About humanity. About what matters in this galaxy. We failed the test of civilization. You passed it. That is a lesson we will not forget. One by one, the major powers followed. Apologies to the Zarathi. Acknowledgement of their failures. Request to learn from humanity's example. The Valorians offered immediate aid to rebuild Zarath Prime. The Centauri Federation proposed technology sharing. The Draxian Union requested military exchange programs. Everyone wanted to prove they could be better. That they had learned something. Sullivan listened to it all with tired eyes. She appreciated the sentiment. But words were cheap. She told them that directly. Keep your apologies. We did not do this for recognition. We did not do this for political favor. We did it because it was right. If you truly want to honor what happened, prove it with actions. Next time someone needs help, be the first ones there. Not the last. Not never. First, the council voted on immediate measures. Unanimous support for Zarathi reconstruction. A memorial to be built for the Valiant's crew. Formal recognition of humanity's sacrifice. These were small things. Symbolic gestures. But they meant something. More significantly, the major powers started requesting formal alliances with Earth. Not from fear, though fear was part of it. But from genuine respect. The Valorian Collective established a new rapid response fleet dedicated to humanitarian missions. They called it the Sullivan Initiative. The Krellian Empire offered reparations to several species they had wronged. It was not much, but it was a start. The Centauri Federation proposed new protocols for mutual defense, provisions that no member species would be abandoned in crisis. They called it the Valiant Accord. Sullivan and Jake returned to Earth to find the planet in mourning. The names of the Valiant's crew were everywhere. Memorial services in every city. Families weeping for lost sons and daughters. Politicians gave speeches about sacrifice and honor. Jake hated the speeches. Those people had opposed the mission. Now they claimed to support it. He wanted to scream at their hypocrisy, but Tharzan advised patience. The Terran assembly gathered to hear Sullivan's full report. She described everything: the battle, the sacrifice, the victory, the cost. She listed every casualty by name. 47 ships deployed, 25 returned. 3,847 personnel lost.